Hello everyone, this is the Eclair Plus from AirBlade UAV. I built mine using the HGLRC F428 flight stack, which features a 28 amp 4-in-1 ESC, F4 flight controller with an OSD, power switchable VTX up to 350 milliwatt, Cadix Turbo S1 micro camera, Hawksky 1107 6500 kV motors, Gym Fan 2540 props, AirBlade battery strap, measures 140 millimeters this way and 97 this way. The way I have mine built weighs almost 97 grams. To save us some time, I'm going to go ahead and talk about my experience a little bit during this flight. Be prepared, I am using those Hawksky motors, and that's going to keep our flight time pretty short. This isn't a dig on the frame at all. This is kind of my complaint when it comes to all 1107 motors, is I can't fly them for more than about 25 or 30 seconds the way I want to fly them until my battery or the flight controller is squawking about low voltage. So I think I'm pretty much done with 1107 motors, and I've got alternate plans that I've been working on to get the performance that I'm looking for and get better flight time. In this particular case, I have the camera angle down a little bit so we can still get that experience of having that motor and that prop right out in front of us. And as you can see there, it handles kind of, if you're watching it in flight, I think you'd think it's just a regular quad, especially if you had the camera angle up and you couldn't see that front prop. And I think that front prop makes this quite unique in that, when we first got started in FPV, we used to talk about feeling like a pod racer from Star Wars all the time. And I think this really brings us back to that, because having that piece of our flying device out in front of us reminds us that we're not just flying something RC, but necessarily we're having an experience that's a little bit Star Wars-like. So let's head back to the desk because that flight was so short, and we'll cover a few more things about my experiences. So I was digging on those motors kind of hard, and digging in this case is not a good thing. And like I said, I think I'm done. We're just going to have to go something more like the X120, the SkyStars X120, to where we just go lower KV and we use 4 cells to try to get that additional performance. But a few things about this, it's got the classic Eclair pod design that he uses here with M3 hardware, and these are nylon, and I find that these hold up very well, and it's probably because of the interlocking mechanism that the pod has with the frame, so that is nice and substantial there, and it fits nice and flush. It doesn't go on real hard, nor does it go on real easy, so I think that connection in there helps to create a secure pod. But I do think if you happen to run anything kind of sideways, you may end up tearing one of these nylon pieces out, but you should have a nylon kit if you're in this hobby very long. Also, mine came in a little bit heavy. Has a little bit to do with my component choices. It also has to do with the fact that how I routed my motor wires. I probably have an extra gram or two, maybe more. I have a full-size buzzer here on the back of my flight controller because I wanted to have a buzzer. Sometimes I build them with a buzzer, sometimes I don't. Here's a little look at the carbon layout. I know that's an important thing for many to see. And what I found was that I was particularly worried about the front end being loose or wobbly, because that is kind of a long arm. If you look at the cut, it's not real substantial down here, and then it bevels down to a fairly long stretch right there. But if I just try to flex this in my hands a little bit, I'm giving that some pretty good gas there on my fingertips to try to get it to flex much, and I can actually feel it stop after I get to that bottom point. So pretty stiff, and I think the carbon's cut the proper way as far as making sure the stiffness for the front and rear arm is in good shape. And the side arms have 2 pieces. I don't know how well you can see this. So you have this triangle cut out to where you run your battery strap through there, but you have 2 pieces, and I think that's pretty smart. Maybe all the Plus frames do this, but I think this is the only Plus I've actually flown so far. But so if you were to clip a tree or something like that, you have this extra rigidity in the rear side of the arm for that durability factor. And also in the flight experience, this is one that you kind of feel like it can yaw and roll really, really well. The pitch kind of holds its course. So you point it in a direction and it seems to go that well. And then it can be a little bit twitchy, I would say, on the roll axis. So you might have to change your rates on the roll axis a little bit. I didn't, but you may feel the need to when you build yours. And the yaw is something that's very interesting, because typically when we're flying a normal quad with 2 motors on each side, I find that my rear motors are oftentimes the motors that get really, really hot. And that's because they're working hard to create that forward angle. And then when we yaw around, when you're flying, if you get enough angle, you're using more roll than you are yaw, but when you're down, you're using a little bit more yaw than you are roll. So depending upon how you fly, the stress on those motors in a typical configuration may change. But in this configuration, you know, we have 3 motors technically working together to create that yaw action. So that feels slightly different, but it didn't feel so different that it felt foreign to me. But of course, I fly a lot of different quads, but you know, the one I can most say that this was close to was that Y4 that we saw on the channel here a while back, where we had 2 motors stacked on top of each other. That one had a real strong yaw axis, as does this one. I did like the Caddx camera. I believe this is one of the less expensive cameras. I didn't look that up before I started cutting the video, but I do think this was like a $19 camera versus those $38 cameras. You know, the cutting edge ones always seems to be twice as much as that last generation. And I know a lot of people are probably wanting camera testing, and I've kind of stopped doing that actually quite a while ago, just because it seemed like it didn't matter what cameras you were testing, people were always wanting direct comparisons against something else. And when you start to do the editing and you're trying to compare a bunch of different cameras at the same time and get everything lined up, it just became a nightmare. And quite frankly, I thought all the cameras were pretty good, and the differences we were seeing between them were marginal. Like you would see, like the Foxeer cameras tend to have a little bit more of a blue hue, so you would see that pattern, and they would differ from camera manufacturer to camera manufacturer on what you might notice, the little differences. So I kind of got out of that game. And I've really enjoyed the Caddx cameras. I find them to work very well. And in my particular case, now in the summertime, we have a lot of shadows, and so when I come diving down, I don't have any problem seeing. I do notice with some other cameras that sometimes it can feel a little bit like I'm peeking. I can't see as far into underneath the trees as I come down out of some sort of high flying maneuver, and I come down. Sometimes as I'm coming down, I see. Now you can see it in the DVR. It's pretty true to form in the DVR, but it just doesn't seem like you can see out here underneath the trees very well as you're coming down. It just takes that moment to get adjusted. Also, I tend to put welder's glue or adhesive on my antennas with these UFL connections on it, and I tend to find that stays on there real well. For me, when I need to remove them, it doesn't remove any of the components or anything like that. I grab the glue with my needle nose and I just kind of work it off, and it sticks very, very well, so you have to use a bit of force. I know that many people aren't big fans of, I shouldn't say many people, there is a population of people that have not had good luck with these stacks. I've only had troubles with all the stacks I've used one time, and I don't know how many they've sold. Of course, that data is not out. It's not something HGLRC wants to talk about, I'm sure. So you may want to try a different flight stack. And flight stacks in general are very, very popular. You can also get the Speedix IS-100 flight stack. It's very comparable, but it does not do smart audio. So that's a minor differences, and you have to use the button on the side to get your channels and pump up your milliwatts that you're running your VTX at. This also, I should point out, has the adjustable camera. So if you're using a larger camera like the Micro Eagle that has a lens that sticks out further, you can adjust that to a degree. Looks like we've got a few millimeters on each side. Hopefully you can see that. I've got it close enough to the camera. You can see that yellow on each side of the screw, so you can move your camera back or forward depending upon what you need in order to get your camera protection to the level that you want. And I did use our felt tape that we talked about, the Tesco felt tape, I think. Sorry, that's the Tessa felt tape. That was some tape we talked about a while before. I've had this on here a while, and it seems to be sticking just fine, just like I planned. You know, been using it a little bit here and there as I do some builds and some other things, and so if you're looking for something that's a little bit easier to work with and it's not zip ties and doesn't break off every time you snap something on a crash, maybe you pick something this up from Amazon or eBay. That is the Eclair Plus. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please leave those in the section down below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.